All right, welcome back here. This week in pro football, Pat Callahan joining you. Please give me a follow, too, on X at TWIPF. Pat, if you're so inclined, I'd appreciate that. And back with this gentleman, Sal Paolantonio from the NFL Matchup Show and ESPN. Sal, you mentioned a couple of trends that you've been looking at relative to this game. Thursday night, Washington at Philadelphia. What do you see?
Well, Pat, I think when you go back and you look at the loss to the Steelers, Jaden Daniels did not have a good game. He completed 50% of his passes, which is low for him, and he averaged fewer than 6 yards per attempt, and he couldn't find really much room to scramble as a runner. That's been a growing trend in the last couple of weeks. Teams, I think, are doing a really good job. The Steelers were one of them, of bottling him up in the pocket. Now, T.J. Watt didn't have any sacks or hits until the fourth quarter, but that's because they were really doing a good job of corralling him in the pocket. They play man coverage with two deep, spy, and allowing that four-man rush to get home. And I think that is beginning to disrupt and force Jaden Daniels to be patient. So that's a difficult combination for a rookie quarterback. If you can lock down Terry McLaurin, like I expect them to do with Quinyon Mitchell, and you can use a spy, and I expect Cooper DeJean to be a spy on Jaden Daniels, like the Steelers did, you can have success against this Commanders offense. Now, defensively, the Commanders' quarterback passer rating for opposition quarterbacks right now is 5th worst in the NFL.
Yeah.
So you can throw on them. That's why Russell Wilson threw on them.
Right.
And the other teams all have a losing record in the bottom 5.
Right.
They're the only team with a winning record that is in the bottom 5 in opposing quarterback passer rating. You can throw on them.
And the Washington rush defense, Sal, is 28th in the league per game, 143 yards a game. Mm-hmm. So when the Eagles have the ball, Sal, I mean, are you going to get it? You see a healthy dose of Saquon here, or do you think? Just talk about that Eagle offense for a minute, if you would. Obviously, they're starting to click now. They get Dallas Goedert back. Where do you see Philadelphia concentrating in this game Thursday night?
Well, notwithstanding the first half of last game against Dallas, where they made several mistakes, including the quarterback, the thing that you see about this offense is the second half, they get better.
All right.
During this 5-game winning streak, Pat, Jalen Hurts has gotten better in the second half than in the first half. And they grind you down because they're so multifaceted. When A.J. Brown plays, and he's playing tomorrow night, they're 6-0. When A.J. Brown plays, they score 30 points a game.
Right.
Because you can't account for A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and then also stop Saquon Barkley, and then account for Jalen Hurts as a runner. They're so multifaceted offensively. They give you so many options to try to – that's what the NFL is right now. So we talked about this at the beginning of the year, if you remember. This was something that Mel Kiper Jr. brought up, and you asked me about. Teams are playing too high safety with man coverage underneath, trying to allow the four-man rush to get home. And that too high safety has kept the numbers down. So what teams are trying to do, and you saw the Ravens – go after a wide receiver. The Steelers bring in a wide receiver. Other teams, the Washington brought in a cornerback. You're either trying to find one-on-one matchups you can exploit through talent, formation variation, tempo, anything you can. The Eagles have it. They can exploit a lot of one-on-one matchups. Right. Teams have a very difficult time trying to figure out who to cover.
Right.
It's a big problem. When A.J. Brown's, you cannot single cover A.J. Brown with a corner. You're wasting your time. He's too strong, too big, too fast, too tough. Catches everything. Right. So you have to occupy 2 people on A.J. Brown. You have to occupy another person just to make sure Jalen Hurts doesn't leak out as a runner.
Right.
And then you have to make sure you're tackling Saquon Barkley. It's a heavy lift. It's a very heavy lift.
And Sal, I want to point out that this is a team, Washington, which I don't want to say now they're not vastly improved. They clearly are. This kid's going to be a special quarterback. I believe that too. But you can't escape the notion that Washington's 7 wins have come against teams with a combined record of 21-37. It includes the Giants twice, Cleveland, Carolina, Chicago. I'm not sure Washington is totally ready yet for prime time. Do you see Jaden Daniels being able to navigate a Vic Fangio defense?
Well, and I think you're right, Pat. I think A, they played a weaker schedule. B, they struggled against Chicago, had to beat them with a Hail Mary.
Right, right.
And then they lost to Pittsburgh at home. So, as I said at the top, I think they're trending in the wrong direction in certain key areas that don't match up well against the Eagles. And one of them is the way this defense of Vic Fangio is playing. Pat, I sent you the numbers right before you went on the air. Number 53, Zach Bond, is the best linebacker in the NFL right now. He's the highest graded linebacker 3 weeks in a row, the last 3 weeks by Pro Football Focus.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened in an Eagles uniform since before Andy Reid became the head coach.
Yeah. That was a great free agent pickup there. He had 8 tackles last week, 1 for a loss. Got to give we're going to front office some credit for that hiring.
Oh, yeah. Look at what Howie Roseman did. He hit big on Zach Bond.
Yeah.
He hit big on Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
He drafted Mitchell out of Toledo,
yeah,
who never was an off-the-ball corner at Toledo, then drafts Cooper DeJean, who's made all the difference in the Fangio defense.
You're right.
I mean,
that's an A+.
Howie Roseman, to me right now, has got to be executive of the year in the National Football League.
That's an A+. You're right about that. But
go on the Eagles. Well, I would write all of your viewers, after the show is over, of course, go on the Eagles website and look at something the Eagles put out each week called Bird's Eye View. I sent it to you, Pat. You know what? Better yet, Pat, why don't you put it on your social media, on your X account?
All right.
And people should go on Pat's X account and look at Bird's Eye View and look at the numbers that are historic by Zach Bond and this Eagles defense during this 5-game stretch. It's amazing.
All right. Appreciate that. Sal, let's take a quick look around the league. Xander, could you bring up that schedule for
you know, I am your executive producer. You realize that.
Well, I'm just asking my producer to do something. I'm not the exec now. But if you bring that up, Xander, thanks very much. Sal, 2 games I want to get your comments on, in addition to the game you're traveling to, which I think it's interesting. It's kind of a last stand for the Bears now. They're down to 5-5, and they're leaking some oil. And it'd be interesting to see if the Packers can get their offense going. But first, talk to me about Kansas City and Buffalo. It's a late Sunday game. The Bills have to be lying in wait for this game. Kansas City comes in at 9-0. How do you see it?
Well, I see it as a must-win for the Bills. You're home. The odds makers say you're going to win the game. It's -135 for the Chiefs. So I think to me, you gotta win the game. You're home in the middle of the year, and it took a blocked field goal for Kansas City to beat the Broncos at home in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So if I'll say this: if Josh Allen does not turn the ball over, the Bills will win. They have enough firepower to do that. They do.
It's funny you mentioned too, because if they don't win it, then that's it. They're out for the number 1 seed. Kansas City's schedule, Sal, just looking at it.
Yeah.
After this game, they're at Carolina, home to Vegas, home to the Chargers, at Cleveland. So I mean, there are not many losses. The only other loss that it might be is that they're home to Houston, and then they're at Pittsburgh. Not easy games. But this is Buffalo's last stand. I agree with you. If they want any chance of not having to go through Arrowhead, this is it for them.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said last week on your show, somebody's got to beat the Chiefs. And boy, the Broncos came close. But this is the game. When you look at that schedule, they could easily run the table. And if they only have to play 1 game at Arrowhead in order to get to the championship game,
that's not right.
Their ticket is punched to New Orleans. I mean, I don't see who do you see going in there and beating them? Maybe the Steelers. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the Steelers, Sal, the 7-2 Steelers host the 7-3 Ravens Sunday. This is it for now. I'm not saying this. I shouldn't say this is it for the Steelers, but this is the marquee game that they come off with a lot of momentum now, having beaten Washington. The Ravens at 7-3 really. Their pass defense last week, Sal, against Cincinnati was like Hall of Fame bad. But Pittsburgh doesn't really win that way. How do you see this game?
Here's an interesting number for you. As an underdog against the Baltimore Ravens, Mike Tomlin has won 5 straight. How about that?
How about that? Yeah.
you know, I think the Steelers have enough offense to disrupt a very poor pass defense of the Ravens. You know, the game is about matchups.
Yeah.
And something that you and I just talked about in this segment. Teams are trying to create one-on-one matchups that they can exploit, either through talent or speed or design or formation variation, whatever it is. That's why the Steelers went and got Mike Williams. He's a tough one-on-one player, despite what happened with him with the New York Jets. He's always been tough. If he's healthy, he's tall, rangy, long arms, great hands. I've always seen him run good routes. The Steelers stole that guy. I mean, he scored the winning touchdown.
He sure did. That's right.
And you already have Pickens, and you have Freiermuth, who's an excellent.
He is. He's an underrated tight end. I agree with you. And a good run game. Sal, what strikes me too, and the statistically wise, is the Steelers in one less game have given up 107 fewer points than the Ravens. The Ravens are giving up 25 points a game. Very odd to see it with a John Harbaugh coach team.
You know, back to the Eagles, by the way, on this 5-game win streak, Pat, they have outgained their opponents by 900 yards.
That might be why they're on a 5-game win streak, huh? Wow, that's 180 yards a game. They're outgaining their opponent.
Well, you could tell you were a CFO. You came up with that number like that. That was impressive, Pat. I would have had to get my calculator out. I'm not going to lie.
That is impressive as all hell, Sal.
Yeah, I think it's actually 899, but we're going to round up.
We're going to round up. That's what we do. It's what we do. We round up. How about that? So anyway, a few good games this week, including your game. I think is going to be a slugfest. So see if the Packers could get it going. Packers offensively, Sal,
important game for the Packers, right? Important. I mean, if they have any shot. I mean, you look at who's going to make it in the NFC. The Packers right now, as it happens, the Eagles would play the Packers. You know, the Packers would come into the link in the first round.
Yeah. I'm not sold on
That's the reason why they sent me to Brazil, Pat, for a preview of the playoffs.
I'm not sold on the Packers at 6-3. I got to see a better effort from that offense. So you'll be there up close and personal. We'll talk about it next week. Sal, I appreciate you spending all this time. Congratulations again on Friday night. Enjoy yourself there, and look forward very much to talking to you again next week. Have a safe trip, all right? Then this gentleman, ESPN's national correspondent, the host of the NFL Matchup Show and the author of How Football Explains America, and a guy who's about to be inducted into the National Italian-American Hall of Fame Friday night in Chicago, Sal Paolantonio. Sal, how you doing?
Pat, that was a great introduction, and you got some jam-packed show and a special edition of This Week in Pro. Right. Pat, you know, you cannot preempt This Week in Pro Football. Cannot happen.
No, they'll try as they might, Sal. Yep. I will make it to the airwaves.
Yes.
Okay. You and I
and I'll be right there with you every single step of the way.
Deeply appreciate that. And congratulations on that induction into that Italian-American Hall of Fame. Good for you. You've had a hell of a run. And something tells me it's not over yet, but that's going to be a great night in Chicago Friday.
Yeah. ESPN colleagues, family, friends. It's going to be big. Jim Porter, the president and chairman of the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, is coming to Chicago to make the presentation to me. So I really wish my dad was alive. He would have got a kick out of it, Pat. He really would have.
Is Jim Porter now the guy who knocks on the doors?
Yes, he's the guy who knocks on the doors.
All right, well, no doubt.
I'm close. It's not quite a knock, Pat. But
I was going to say now, you haven't seen the last of Jim Porter.
Oh, well, I don't know about that.
So that's good for you. Good for you, Sal. And then you're out there, you're covering Packers Bears on Sunday after you do Eagles Commanders Thursday night, right?
Yes. The Eagles Commanders is a very intriguing game. It's such a great game to start off a jam-packed week 11. Yeah. You have these two teams separated by basically a half a game, a team that was red hot until the Steelers, dropped that little dime on them in the fourth quarter at home. I was there when it happened. I was on the air with Steve Levy. We couldn't believe that it happened and the way the Steelers came back and won that game. So there are a couple of trends to look at with the Washington Commanders right now that I think tilt the game towards the Eagles.
All right. Well, before you do that, let me do a little good, bad, and ugly with you.
Okay, let's go. Yeah.
And sorry, but Xander, if you bring up that schedule. I mean, the standings. Thank you very much. We'll do that. All right, Sal, give me your comments. There's some shotgun comments from Sal Paolantonio. The good last week, Sal. The Chiefs and the Lions do what winning teams do, right? They were eminently losable games, but when you've got a good team, you find a way to win games the way they did, right?
Yeah, that was what Dan Campbell said after the game, the head coach of the Lions, Pat. Dan Campbell said, when you don't have your best day and you still win the game, that's the mark of a good team. That's the sign that you have a good football team.
Yep.
If you have that kind of resiliency and determination and you play fourth quarters. As for the Kansas City Chiefs, Pat, the Chiefs have come from behind in 8 of their 9 wins. 8 of their 9 wins, and 7 of their 9 wins are by 1 score. It is a 1-score league. Yep. That is a theme that we have harped on here on this program. And more games have been decided by 1 score, 3, 6, or 7 points at this point in the NFL season than any time in pro football history. We are in a 1-score league. And if you have a team like the Chiefs or the Lions who can stay alive to the end, they will find a way to beat you, Pat.
Yep. That's right. You mentioned in previous show, Denver was coming on. They obviously were. They could have won that game, but that's what good teams do. They blocked that kick. I'll tell you, if that guy didn't block the kick, I think there were 2 other Chiefs who were going to block it. So that's what good teams do. And I wanted to mention, too, in terms of good teams, Sal, you just mentioned you were there. The Steelers, all of a sudden, get to 7-2 with I think a quality road win, right?
Super quality road win. The thing about the Steelers is they're sneaky consistent. So the Washington Commanders were playing ferocious, energized defense on their front 4 the entire game. I was just shocked by how good they had looked in the game, but yet the Steelers scored a touchdown in each quarter. They had a touchdown drive in all 4 quarters, Pat. And that's really what Russell Wilson used to do in Seattle. Russell Wilson, relied on a run game and a good defense, and he would score enough points to win. And when he dropped that ball in the end zone, in the corner of the end zone to Mike Williams, that was something we have seen from Russell Wilson many times before, to trust his receiver, put it in a spot and go get it.
Yeah. Russell's starting to look a little bit like the previous iteration of Russell Wilson.
Yes.
So the Steelers are going to be, it's going to be like, and I talked about it at the Open, that's a big, big game in the AFC North on Sunday. Ravens at Steelers. Sal, a little bit of the bad from week number 10. And this is the mirror image of what we just talked about, Chiefs and Lions. And that is the Falcons and the Texans are good teams who, Sal, I don't think have the maturity or just the knowledge, if you will, of how to win games that they should win. And I think that's what happened to both of them Sunday.
Yeah, well, both of them luckily play in bad divisions. Yeah. So it'd be really hard for both of them not to make the playoffs and not to win a division. Right. So I would say right now they're bad. They're trending into the bad. And, if Houston gets some players back, they'll be pretty good. But the AFC is so loaded, Pat. They're not going to beat Buffalo. They're not going to beat Kansas City. They're not going to beat Pittsburgh. They're not going to beat Baltimore in the playoffs. They're just not.
All right. I can tell you right now, Sal, the Houston Texans will host the early Saturday game in the wild card weekend in January. That is the AFC South window for the initial wild card weekend game. Sal, the other bad thing I wanted to mention, close to my heart here, the Rams just gacked up a loss Monday night. Sal, outside of their 2 wins against San Francisco and Minnesota, the Rams have scored 7 offensive touchdowns in 7 games. I don't know. Matthew Stafford is in a bit of a slump right now, and they may have played themselves out of the playoff picture Monday night.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Pat. And they looked bad offensively. Lisa Salters interviewed McKay and Sean McVay, rather, and at halftime, and she asked him, "How do you get your offense going?" And he really didn't have an answer. So I don't think he has an answer right now, and it's sad because he's probably got the Defensive Rookie of the Year on his football team. I mean, Mitchell for the Eagles has been good, but Verse has been fantastic.
Verse has been great, right?
Yeah, he's been great. And, they're wasting, I think, a very good defensive unit. And I don't understand it. I really don't. He's a good coach. Stafford's a good quarterback. But Stafford was just holding on to the ball way too long.
Yeah. Sal, the ugly from week number 10, we don't have to search very hard for this. Okay. The Cowboys are a complete train wreck right now. And then the other thing I'd like you to comment on, the Bears, you're going to see Sunday, no touchdowns in 2 weeks. They have ground to a complete halt. And New York football is world-class bad right now, Sal.
Yeah, you're going to have Gary on a little bit later, Gary Myers, who knows both of those New York teams real well, and he knows the Dallas Cowboys, and he'll give you a detailed look at what's going on with those teams. But I think it comes down to, okay, you've got an injured quarterback in Dallas, you got a bad quarterback in the Giants, and you got an aging quarterback with the Jets. You can't win football games in the NFL like that. I don't understand what these people were thinking.
Yeah.
And Dallas is bad in all three phases. I said that to you last week.
All right.
And, the Eagles covered for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
They went on the road and covered and won in Dallas for the first time in a long time. So,
yeah,
they are bad in all three phases, but it all comes down to the quarterback. And you got a lame duck head coach in both the Giants and the Cowboys. I don't think Dable's coming back, even John Mara said he was.
Yeah,
even though John Mara said he was going to keep him, I don't think it's going to happen. And you got an interim coach with the Jets. If you have that situation at the two pivotal positions, head coach and quarterback, you got problems.
No, you're right. You got a lame duck really in all three of them because there's no way Mike McCarthy's going to last in Dallas at the expiration of his deal.
You know what can save Dallas? Deion Sanders. Bring him into there.
How about that? There you go. All right. Sal Pao, stay with me, please, because when we get back, I want to now look at this Thursday night game, Philadelphia and Washington. You mentioned some trends that you've been looking at, and I'm very anxious to hear them. We'll do that next with Sal Paolantonio on This Week in Pro Football, presented by Kennedy Ford.